year of grad school. Like when I first got there, I bought this mug.
Wow.
So that is an old mug right there.
Wow.
From back in the day.
Yeah, that's probably what, 93?
Yeah, it's probably right.
Wow. That's
Wait, did you guys go to grad school together?
No.
But
this is Gus.
you were in the same program.
Dave, meet Gus.
Hey.
Yeah, hi Gus.
Nice to meet you.
So no, Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you please.
So I was in grad school at Kent State when Cammie was an undergrad at Kent State.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we were in the same program.
Okay.
I think for like a hot minute we had studios next to each other because they let seniors have studios in the grad area because there was like 2 of us or something.
And I remember that you were like completely in love with that red-leaded frit.
Right?
That's all we've been talking about lately is
there was like 40 pounds of that stuff in Cammie's studio.
Yeah, I would just have a cigarette in one hand and a paintbrush with lead in the other.
Yeah.
It was disgusting. Yeah. I'm surprised I still have teeth, to be honest.
Yeah.
Have you had your heavy metals levels checked, Cammie?
I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what they'll
Ignorance
say.
Is bliss.
Yeah, exactly. So, Dave, tell us a little bit about, well, I mean, aside from Kent, like where are you from? And then tell us where you are right now.
So I'm from the Carolinas, is usually what I say, because I was born in North Carolina in Greensboro, grew up in Charlotte, but then went to college in South Carolina at Furman University, and then I actually ended up living in Greenville, Spartanburg, which is South Carolina, after grad school for longer than I actually lived in North Carolina total. So in a way, I've lived in both of the Carolinas equally. And now I'm in the Chicago suburbs I'm teaching at Wheaton College. So I'm just west of Chicago.
I have to say, I'm also from Greensboro.
Oh, nice.
And don't currently live there.
So
seems like a nice place to be from.
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily a great place. I don't really know that much about Greensboro anymore.
I'm going to hold on a second. Dun. Hold on, cancel that. I'm trying to I'm gonna mute. Sorry, everybody. Everybody seems to be muted. Weird. Okay. That's weird. Okay, so how long have you been at Wheaton?
This is 14 years. So I'm actually on sabbatical this semester, which is an incredible lucky break.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you would have had to.
Because I'm not right.
You would have
had to try to teach ceramics and sculpture online.
We're doing it. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is a great way to do it.
So thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
So tell us, why did you, where are you? Pottery, sculpture, what's happening? Tell us everything.
So, yes is the answer to your question, pottery and sculpture. I'm a bit all over the map. As I mentioned, I was at Kent State in grad school getting my MFA in ceramics. So everything that I do, I think, is really piped through that funnel. That lens of mine is always clay. I make a lot of pots. I've been leaning into pots pretty heavily for the last couple of years because I got really excited about some glaze experiments I was doing, and then some forms that started to really seem like they were following the glaze. But really, I'm probably if for what little reputation I have, that reputation is probably more related to my sculptural work. So I do ceramic sculpture, and then I started to branch out into a lot of different things. I'm a very kind of all over the map media person. So I do performance pieces in the woods with video and installation work and collage. I'm looking around my studio and collage, and behind me is a big wooden sculpture that's related to my ceramic sculpture. So I just keep exploring, I think.
Can you?
What are you spending your time on, like, as your, like, what are you doing during your sabbatical? Is there like a big project that you're working on, or are you just spending it working throughout?
Well, the big project was to go to Italy in a week and spend 6 weeks in Italy. So that's gone.
Oh.
I did the Baltimore ACC craft show.
And what is that, just so everybody knows?
So that's the American Craft Council does a big show. They do 4 shows across the country, which are both, they're craft oriented. I got in for pottery. And so I was making a lot of pottery at the beginning of my sabbatical. And then I went to Baltimore, and I both sold directly and I took wholesale orders. And so right now in my studio, I've got wholesale orders. I've got here's my checklist of the next orders that I need to do. So I'm kind of running through my list and just checking off things as I get them done.
That's your spreadsheet.
Yes, my spreadsheet. Yes.
Good.
I'm old school.
How long
So
have you
I can show you some stuff in the studio. We can do it later. We can do it now.
Yeah, let's do it now. Let's walk us through.
All right, let's see. I don't know if I can flip this camera.
And it's such a nice looking studio.
Yes, I can. All right. So here's my work in progress. So you can see some of that all covered up. So I'm working on these pouring jars right now. And all the spouts, sorry, there's a lot of stuff. So here's all the spouts. Here's some recently finished pieces. Here's all that I have to unload out of the kiln. So that's sort of pottery. Here's some finished pots. So you can kind of see a little bit more about the aesthetic.
How are those fired?
Let me turn the camera around. So those are cone tin, reduction fired. And that's it. Just a lot of them are fired many times. I'll go back. So one of the things that I started to experiment with was a lot of chinos and carbon traps and things that I could get sort of a wood-fired look out of. And then I started to use, like, this is a local clay glaze, this yellow. And this yellow is also this green. So it just sort of depends on atmosphere. And then I'm also sprinkling some wood ash onto the pieces. You can kind of see maybe a little bit of speckle.
Yeah.
On that.
What a nice trick, Dave. Good one.
Yeah, I know. Tricky. And then I'm also getting some pretty interesting carbon trapping on surfaces by multiple, like layering glazes and firing multiple times. So you can kind of see some of the crystalline carbon structure maybe in that. So this glaze, which has got kind of the gray blue, is this glaze, which is just a chun. But this has been fired once. And this has been fired 3 times. And then multiple layers are put on each time. So yeah, we talk about that in a minute. So
yeah, let's come
there's
back
a collage. This is made with strips of paper. I don't know if you can read it. Those little lines are actually lines cut from an 1890 something Encyclopedia Britannica. which even as I say that sounds absurd. Here's some ceramic sculpture.
Maybe we should have you say what an encyclopedia is for the people that don't.
It's what Wikipedia used to be when it was on paper.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so and then like I said, there's that piece in the background. I've got Gus, you were talking about the lighting. I've got this unbelievable studio. So
yeah,
I'm in a warehouse space. And so I've got an enormous bank. So one side wall is all natural light. And then it's tall. And you can actually see I built a loft. So I've got a second story in this place.
Doing these studio visits has been it's been fun to like get to meet all these other people, but it's been such a bummer to see what everybody else's studio in the rest of the country looks like.
I mean, really, it's insane. I feel slightly dirty having this much space. But when I came to interview for the job, they showed me the salary and I was like, there's no way, like that's impossible. And the chair of the department was like, wait, don't say anything until you see the studio. And I was like, seriously, how much difference can the studio make? And then I walked into this place and thought, I think I can make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the size of my apartment to be.
Yeah, it's 20 by 40.
Wow.
The ground space. So.
And then are you firing your work at the school, like as far as glaze firing goes?
Yes. So I only have the big electric kiln here. And so when I'm doing the sculpture, I actually can do it all here. I'm doing earthenware. And then, so I'm using the gas kiln at the college to fire the pots. Right. And I have a wood kiln too. So actually, the college owns a piece of land that's in upstate Wisconsin. So it's actually about a 6.5 hour drive from here. What? But we managed to, I managed to talk them into building a small wood kiln there. We got a backer who was able to back it. And then I teach a class up there every summer. And for 2 weeks, we make pots and I fire the wood kiln. And then I bring classes up each semester to fire the wood kiln 2 other times.
That's a ways to go to fire a wood kiln.
It is a long, So we have to leave on Wednesday morning and we get back Sunday at 9 o'clock at night. And then I have to teach Monday morning. So those are 12 to 14 hour days every day. So
that's a true pilgrimage.
It is.
You really have to be we're doing this.
You have to be we're doing it. You got to be absolutely locked in all the time. Because the students, students get FOMO. You got to deal with their idiosyncrasies. So
that's such a gentle.
They miss shifts, right? They sleep in. They want to get up at the crack of noon. All that stuff.
So let's go back to, so you were between the sculpture and the pottery. I know you just did a big installation with bees. What are some themes in your sculpture?
Yeah, I think one of the themes that sort of pervades everything is some kind of sense of contemplation. I think my work in some ways has gone from being, if you remember anything I was making in grad school, it was pretty loud and aggressive and kind of folk arty, kind of in your face in a weird way. Actually, maybe now that I'm even thinking about it, my senior show wasn't that way at all. It was that and calm at the same time because it had a lot of space in it. But so I think I have a lot of that sort of sense of spaciousness. Even though I really want to be a maximalist, I end up not being as maximal as I every time I try to put things on, I end up pulling things back apart. But nature, environmental concerns sometimes pops up. So the bee project is an attempt to make 10,000 bees from a mold. I actually have one here. This one is gold leafed.
Oh, wow.
So they're actually, you know, bee-sized. And then they get displayed in a labyrinth in a gallery setting. So right now, I can't find a gallery big enough to do 10,000. So I have about 3,000 made. And the biggest I've ever been able to do in an installation is about 1,400. So 1,400 take up a 20 by 20 space. So, so I'm going to need like an insanely big space to be able to do the whole thing.
Wow. Okay. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Like, that's so
and
good.
then, and then it keeps dawning on me, like, you know, and then I'm not making any money for it. So like, you know, every time I do it, I have to buy all this lumber and build a labyrinth. And then, you know, and then like
bigger and
I have to
bigger
take it all down. And then I don't want to keep it here in my studio. So I end up like trashing the lumber or giving it away or something. And then I have to do the whole thing over again. So I don't know. It's not a smart business model.
It looks really, I mean,
but it looks awesome.
Yeah. And if you guys go on Instagram and and your website, you'll see the piece, and it's pretty, like, just the sheer amount of bees is like overwhelming.
My biggest honor in my career right now came from that exhibition, because Garth Clark, if you remember Garth Clark, the art critic, who used to also
I don't know
have
who
a
that
bunch
is.
So anyway, he is a art critic, but also used to be a gallery owner, and has written several books on ceramics and ceramics aesthetics and things like that. I don't know him at all, but he saw it on Instagram and sent me a note about it and said it was like a great installation. And I was like, can I put that on my business card? Like, so anyway, he was somebody who when I was coming through undergrad, he was somebody who I was doing a lot of reading about. Like, I was reading his books. And so when he finally said, like, when he reached out, I was like flabbergasted. So, yeah.
Tell us about your shapes and forms in your pottery as well. And do you feel like they're so separate, like your sculpture and your pottery, or do you find overlaps between the two?
I'm trying to figure that out. So another really fortunate thing was I got to do 2 summers in an artist residency in Lanzhou, China. And so when I was an undergrad, I was really heavily influenced by some professors who had spent time in Japan. So, you know, I wanted that wabi-sabi, really loose aesthetic. And then that's partially why I came to Kent State, because of Kirk.
Very Kirkman, I guess.
And so Kirk actually sort of, his amp went to 11, right? Like, his level of looseness was so like ridiculously high off the charts. I was completely awe-inspired and awestruck, but I could never quite figure out like how to mimic that fully. And when I did, it just sort of felt like his work. And then
I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, right. And then when my wife and I got married, we actually we registered with Mark Hewitt, who is this potter who studied with Pardue, who lives in the Carolinas. So we ended up with all this Mark Hewitt pottery. And I was looking around because I think I've got a couple of.
No.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, we'll circle back around, but that would be a great someone to, if you love pottery, a great person.
Oh yeah, for sure. So so what I realized was I was using, in my daily life, I was using the gosh, I just said his name. What's his name? I was using the Mark Hewitt stuff. Like I was just reaching for it all the time. Like I just wouldn't even think about it. I was just instinctually using way more Mark Hewitt wear than anything else. And so I started to try to figure out how to do something that was a little bit more simplified and a little bit tighter, but try to keep those two things in balance. Something that's had a little bit of wabi to it, but also was a little bit more formal. And China was this really interesting place to go because in a way, the Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi and the Chinese aesthetic are at odds with each other. And so I ended up, I think, trying to it was really good for me to figure out how to hybridize things. Now I think my work is starting to almost look like it's coming from natural objects. So it's in a way it's way more tightly thrown than something that Kirk would have made. But its shapes remind me of a book that I saw in grad school. I actually have. It's called Naturist Designer. And that book was written by, it's actually just a photo book by a biologist who in the 70s got interested in photography. And I guess he got like camera that can do like super macro or micro, whatever, tiny things. So he took all these photos with just like seed pods against a backdrop. That book is actually, you can like, if you Google Naturist Designer, you'll see like a bunch of images pop up from it. And I think that my work, I'm gonna flip this around. Like I'm looking at these forms while I'm talking to you right here. And I'm thinking like, I mean, this is a moon jar.
It's just a Zoom conference.
But it's a moon jar that's sort of like a seed pod, like a rose hip. And then that picture kind of has another kind of natural shape to it. So they're not Mark Hewitt shapes. They're not Kirk Mangus shapes, which is good. So hopefully they're becoming my shapes.
One of the things that I like about your pottery, especially your glazing, which I have to tell you, thank you so much, because I spent about a year trying to mimic your glazes, and I'm not even close, to be honest. However, but what I like about them is that, you know, with these, like, they're all dipped, poured and dipped, and
yep.
That they just look, they look old and modern at the same time. Something about the dip lines that you get, how do you do that?
Let me pull one real quick. I'll show you. Okay. So really it's the embarrassing thing is how really ridiculously simple it is. Like it's this great effect that's really easy to do. So one of the things I like to do, you can kind of, maybe you can see it on the inside of this. Can you see it sort of a half and half?
Yeah.
So a lot of times I use 3 glazes almost on every piece. So one glaze is usually this sort of orangey red glaze. And I glaze the whole pot in that. And this is a Shino. It's just a Shino that's like incredibly water thin. So that's the first glaze. And then I'm using a white Shino, and I'm taking the whole pot and just holding it like this and dipping it halfway. So that gives me the 50-50 that you see. And then where that line is where I turned this way, and I took a ladle with the blue and I poured a ladle across the line.
Oh, a ladle.
And that's it.
Dang it.
See how, I mean, again, now that I've told you, it's like, oh,
the ladle.
So, like, it's so stupid. And yet, you know, since I do a lot with the ladle, I've got one in the studio. I just saw it. I put it away somewhere. Anyway, my ladle is actually just like from the dollar store. It's like a measuring cup with a stick on it. So it's like a 1 cup stick with a little tiny pour spout. So they're $1 each. So I bought 20. And so when I glaze, I just like each glaze has one of those. So I can just stir it all up, and then when I go to glaze, it's like dip, half dip, choose one, take a ladle, do a pour. Or sometimes I overlap the pours, but yeah, that's basically it.
That's like, yeah, okay. That's so simple. I didn't really.
I know. Sorry.
I mean, good. Congratulations. You have it so dialed in. Like they're perfect.
The mystique is gone.
No, it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do what you do. And then we have a couple minutes left. So can you tell us like about when you're working with your forms, how do you feel about like what you're doing and like design trends in the world? Like, cause your work is like, I feel like it's going to come in and out of style. And then you're also like doing some work that sort of like, you can see like, it does feel contemporary. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I remember something. So going back to Kirk, which has now come up like 5 times in this conversation.
That's
so
that's what we have in common. And Kirk is a huge Kirk fan too.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things Kirk said was,
we're talking about Kirk Mangus, by the way.
Kirk Mangus. Yeah. Sorry. He said, look, your work is going to he actually said your work is going to go in and out of style. Like you can't chase the style. You have to do what you do. And then when when that moment happens, when everybody catches up to you, like when it's in, double your work, like double your effort. That's basically what he said. It's like, you can't control what the market's going to do. You just do you. And then when you're popular, crank. That was basically his advice. So in some ways I do that. It's been interesting because now I'm starting to think about the possibility of something that's a little bit more wholesale. I've got some former students who live in the area who are really good and they want to help me make work. And so it sort of makes me think, can I make some forms that they can help me make and then find a way to make that marketable and wholesalable so that they can get an income and I can get an income off of that work, which would free me up to do another body of work that's like totally my own. So I'm in this weird phase because now I'm over 50 and I'm starting to see the place where like I totally recognize that I'm a really old school dude, right? Like the way that I think is not the way NCECA thinks anymore. NCECA being the National Council for Education in Ceramic Arts, like the sort of governing body, if you will, of trends in ceramics. I feel like what I do is important enough. I'm not going to change it, but I also recognize it's probably wise for me to start thinking about my exit strategy from higher ed. Like it's going to be really good for somebody younger to come in and take my place and bring all these new ideas and totally like they'll be able to connect with students in 10 years from now in a way I'm not going to be able to connect with them. So what's my way forward? Because I'm now thinking about, 10, 15 years from now, I'm going to be retiring, which means I'm going to be trying to shift into a full-time art practice. And if I can start now to slowly build up a business that is sustainable, then I'll be in really good shape. So whenever that takes over, I can do some. So I am now weirdly aware of those trends that you're talking about. And I'm having a struggle to figure out where's my voice and my identity in relationship to that, and how do I stay true to myself, but also be aware of where I can lean into the commercial. Like I've never thought that way until this point in my career, but I'm thinking that way now.
Wow. I totally thought you were going to say that you were going to get out of the big city and then go to the woods and just live off the land.
Well, that's part of it. I would love that. I mean, I'm a big gardener. Actually, one of the tricky things about the quarantine for me is that gardening supplies are not considered essential, which I think is like, we're all in quarantine. Do you not want me to grow my own food? Hello?
Wait, so really quick, speaking of being like in quarantine, I noticed that you have a blog that's been running like I kept scrolling back trying to find the end of it, and I got to like 2014, I think. But how long have you, I mean, it seems like you've already put some effort into trying to like teach and connect with people through like virtual communities like this. Is that something that was part of your practice at one point?
That's really, again, it was, to me, I think it's really important to try to, my practice is very much based on trying to build a community and trying to be part of a community, and how does my work work in community? So that to me has always been important. I also recognize that one of my strengths is that I did not know this, but I think more recently I've realized I'm actually fairly decent at teaching. Like, I can actually teach people. Like, that's a skill that I've somehow picked up. I guess probably doing it for 20 years, you finally figure it out. And so I'm trying to say, well, how can I gift that back into the community? Of course, social media becomes, a platform that was non-existent when I was starting, that I just realized gives me the opportunity to share that knowledge and build community at the same time. So I've been trying to learn that more and more. So as you look at if you go to IGTV, or if you go to YouTube, or if you go to my website, you can find these videos. The videos are actually fairly recent. So
thank you so much for doing this. No, it's going to cut off, but I just want to say thanks. It's great to see you. Thanks everybody that came to the big show. Good luck, and we'll everyone follow David JP Hooker on Instagram. So great. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Gus. Thanks, Cammie. Thanks,
You're
everybody.
the best. Thank you.
See ya. Okay.
Cool.
Bye.
Yeah.